The muffled sound of the train whistle cut through the morning silence like a blade. It was curious how, even in the middle of a war, certain sounds could be more violent than any explosion. On the platform, hundreds of goodbyes were taking place at the same time, as if love had become a silent battlefield, where no one emerged unscathed. He held her hands, strong, tight, but still trembling. Their intertwined fingers seemed like a desperate attempt to hold back time, to stop that moment from slipping through the cracks of reality. His name was Victor, and hers was Anna, two young people whom the world tried to separate, but who, until then, fought with everything they had to stay together, even if it was in memories, in promises, in letters. His uniform was impeccable, although his eyes betrayed an inner chaos that was impossible to hide. The blue dress she was wearing seemed hand-picked. It wasn't just an outfit, it was a living memory. It was the dress he always said made her look like a piece of heaven. Anna looked at him as if recording every feature, every detail for the last time. The small scar above the eyebrow, the way he pressed his lips together when he was about to cry but didn't want anyone to see, the smell, the texture of a poorly shaved beard, and most of all, those eyes. Eyes that promised love but carried the fear of what was to come. "Come back to me, Victor. Promise me you'll come back." Her voice came out as a whisper, but it carried the weight of someone trying to defy their own destiny. He didn't answer right away. The lump in his throat felt like it had turned to concrete. He took a deep breath, held her face between his hands and, with his forehead pressed against hers, let the silence say what no words could. "I'll be back. I swear I'll be back," he finally replied, and each letter seemed to be ripped from the depths of his being. The train began to move slowly, creaking as if it itself suffered from having to carry away so many pieces of so many lives. They kissed, and that kiss was no longer an ordinary gesture of love. It was a pact sealed between two hearts that refused to accept that war had the power to separate them. When Victor boarded the train, he didn't look back right away. He was too much of a coward to watch her face dissolve into tears. But something inside him screamed. He couldn't leave her like this. Not like this. Not with this image as his last memory. He ran to the door, stuck, half of his body out, and shouting over the metallic sound of the tracks, let out the words that, for some reason, he hadn't said before. "Anna, I love you. I will always love you." She raised her hand, as if trying to reach him, and with her face wet with tears, she replied in the same tone, "And I'll wait for you. Even if it's forever, I'll wait for you." The train picked up speed. The images began to fade, like blurred brushstrokes on the canvas of a nervous painter. The village, the people, the smell of coffee coming from the station. Everything was being left behind. Everything except her, because she didn't fit into the landscape. She now lived inside it. As the train cut through the fields, Victor leaned his head against the window. Outside, the world seemed different. Trees passed by in green blurs. The wind that blew in his face seemed to carry voices, memories that he didn't know if he wanted to forget or desperately hold on to. The heart was beating hard. Each beat seemed to say one word: back, back, back. But the world, at that moment, was not made of promises. It was made of uncertainty. War had no room for love. Or, perhaps, it was precisely in war that love showed its most ferocious, most intense, most desperately alive face. In his pocket he clutched a letter, the first of many he would write. The words were not on paper yet, but they were already pulsing through his mind. "My love, if I could, I would take you with me. But, since I can't, I carry in my heart every smile, every touch, every word. If one day the world tries to make me forget, let it prepare itself. Because there is no bomb, there is no death, there is no war capable of erasing what you mean to me." The train continued, and as it continued, he understood he was going to war. But deep down, he would fight not only for a country, not only for a flag, he would fight, above all, for that love, for her, for them. And so began a journey that would not be made only of bullets and blood, but of letters, of longing, of love, and of a promise that not even destiny itself would have the courage to break. The smell of gunpowder would never leave Victor's memory. It was a smell that stuck to the skin, the clothes, the soul. That kind of scent that seeps into the seams of life and, even after it's all over, lingers there, like a reminder that there are scars you can't see, but they hurt forever. The days at the front had no beginning, middle, or end, they were a continuous line of waiting, fear and, sometimes, hope. Hope that often came wrapped in yellowed paper, sealed with tears, and written by hands that trembled more from longing than from the cold. That's how he survived, waiting for letters, and writing others, because, in that place where life was worth less than a bullet, it was in paper that he found refuge. The trenches were deep, made to protect against gunfire and bombs. But the real trenches that kept him standing were the words he received and sent to Anna. The day began before sunrise. The sound of the officers' screams mixed with the echo of distant gunshots formed a cruel soundtrack, announcing that they had once again woken up, and that this, in itself, was already a miracle. Victor stood up, adjusted his helmet, checked his rifle, and took a deep breath. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face, her smile, her gaze that seemed to calm him, even though they were miles away. And that was why, even before any order, he performed his silent ritual. He reached into the inside pocket of his coat and touched the letter from her that he always carried close to his chest. "I'm fine, my love. The village is still peaceful. The afternoons have been silent since you left, but every time the wind blows, I swear I can hear your voice." Those words were more effective than any shield, because while his fellow soldiers protected themselves with steel and gunpowder, Victor protected himself with love. The front, however, did not forgive distractions. Explosions just a few meters away, screams, disjointed orders, and in the midst of all this, he needed to remember that he was still a man, and not just a cog in the cruel machine of war. There were days when one did not eat, others when one did not sleep. The cold tore at the skin, hunger gnawed at the stomach, but nothing, absolutely nothing, was crueler than absence. Her absence, the absence of everything that resembled life. And that was why, in the rare breaks, he wrote, sitting at the bottom of the trench, with a small candle flickering and illuminating the crumpled paper. His hands scratched out words that tried, somehow, to make Anna understand what even he could not explain. "My love, sometimes I find myself looking at the sky, trying to imagine if, at this exact moment, you are also looking at it. I wonder if the wind that touches my face is the same one that touches yours. I wonder if, in some way that not even God can explain, our thoughts meet in the middle of this chaos." The sound of a nearby explosion interrupts. The earth shakes. Dirt, mud, and debris fly. He closes his eyes. He clutches the paper. He breathes, and he keeps writing. Because, in that scenario where everything seemed destined to be destroyed, loving was an act of resistance. At night, when the fighting had ceased for a few hours, Victor and his companions would gather around a small makeshift campfire. Each one, in his own way, told stories of those they had left behind. Photos were passed from hand to hand, smiling faces, frozen in time, contrasted with the exhausted looks of those who were there, in the present. Some said that war turned men into machines. But, looking at it, Victor disagreed. War, in fact, made men remember what it was to be human, because it was in the midst of horror that they rediscovered the value of a smile, of a hug, of a memory. And when dawn fell, the cold took over everything. Huddled in his thin blanket, he looked up at the sky. The stars seemed further away than ever, and yet, he knew that somewhere, under the same sky, she was looking at those stars too. "If you knew, Anna, how many times I have looked for you in them, how many times I have whispered your name, hoping that the wind would carry it to you." The front was an invisible line that divided not only territories, but also hearts. On one side, love, on the other, fear. And every day, Victor crossed that line, hoping that in the end, love would be stronger. But deep down, something in him knew. The war had yet to show its cruelest side, and when it did, he would understand that there is pain that not even bullets can cause, pain that arrives in the form of a letter. The front was relatively quiet that morning. It was that strange, uncomfortable kind of silence that never meant peace, but merely a temporary respite before the next storm of steel, fire, and blood. Victor, sitting at the bottom of the trench, was writing another letter to Anna. His hands were already calloused, not only from the cold and the mud, but from trying so many times, without success, to put into words everything he felt. "My love, today the sky dawned grey, heavy, as if it also missed you. I wonder if there, where you are, the flowers are still blooming, if the wind still dances in the leaves, as it did when we walked together through the village. Here, here there is only longing, a longing that does not fit in the chest, nor on paper. He stopped. He looked out at the horizon. The smell of gunpowder never quite went away. It was a constant reminder that at any moment it could all end. But at that particular moment, something was about to happen. Something that no bomb, no gunshot, no war cry could cause. A soldier ran toward him, stumbling through the mud, almost out of breath. In his hands was an envelope, but it wasn't just any envelope. It was different. It didn't have the army seal. It didn't have the formality of military communications. It was a civilian letter, and in that context a civilian letter meant only two things: good news, or the end of an entire world. Soldier, Victor. The man called out breathlessly, holding out the envelope. They brought this from the campaign post office. They said it was urgent. ... Double quotes. Victor stood still for a few seconds. His heart raced. His hands, so accustomed to holding weapons, now trembled in front of a simple piece of paper. The world suddenly seemed to be reduced to that crumpled envelope, stained at the edges. He picked it up. He recognized it immediately. Her handwriting, that slightly slanted handwriting, with delicate curves, as if each letter were a whisper, a caress. But something was wrong. This wasn't a letter like the others. It didn't have the lightness of the I miss you notes. It didn't have the smiles drawn on the margins. It was short, and above his name, there was something that had never been there before. The word, urgent. The air was lacking. The throat dried up. The hands hesitated. For a moment, Victor didn't know if he really wanted to open it, because, deep down, the heart already knew. The body perceives things that the mind refuses to accept. With a shaky tear, he opened it, and before he had even read the first line, he noticed the tear stains on the paper. The words seemed to have been written in a hurry, as if every second counted. And then he read, "My love, if this letter reached you, it's because I couldn't hide it anymore. And if I write to you like this, so different from the others, it's because I need to tell you something that hurts me much more than any bomb that could hit you." The world seemed to shatter around him. The sound of soldiers, officers, shrapnel in the distance. Everything became a distant, muffled, irrelevant hum. At that moment, only those words existed. Victor, ... I'm sick. And it's not a sickness that can be cured with rest, or with prayer, or with hope. I tried to hide it. I tried to be strong. I didn't want you to worry. I didn't want to be a burden to you there, in the middle of this hell. But now, ... now I can't pretend anymore. Victor's hands gripped the paper so tightly that one of the corners tore. His legs gave out. He sat down on the ground of the trench, in the middle of the mud, without caring about anything else. The doctors were clear. I don't have many days left. Maybe weeks, ... maybe less. And I write to you, love of my life, not to bring you pain, but because I can't leave without you knowing that every beat of my heart, until the last one, is yours. Always has been, always will be. The breath became short. His eyes instantly filled with tears. The tears flowed uncontrollably, mixing with the dirt on his face, the sweat, the smell of gunpowder. If you can, ... come back. If you can, tingle quotes, T ... take me in your thoughts, take me in your letters, take me in your chest, because, somehow, I will be with you. Always. He pressed the paper to his chest, as if it were possible, in that gesture, to stop the world from falling apart. His chest rose and fell in despair. His body trembled, no longer from the cold, but from a pain that he didn't know where it hurt most. In his heart, in his soul, in his life. No, ... no, ... no, ... he repeated, as if that could somehow undo reality. Around, some soldiers noticed. They approached, but no one had anything to say. Because, in war, everyone knew, there is pain that not even the greatest horrors of the front are capable of causing. And this ... this was one of them. The commander approached, serious. He saw Victor's condition. He read in his eyes something that no uniform, no training, no war manual could fix. "What happened, soldier?" he asked, but the answer was already written on his face. Victor looked, holding the crumpled paper. In a voice almost silent, he replied, She's dying, ... The silence that followed was more devastating than any bombing. The commander, his face hardened by war, took a deep breath. He placed a hand on his shoulder. and in that gesture there was everything: compassion, helplessness, and also the certainty that, in war, it is not always possible to save those we love. But Victor, Victor wasn't willing to accept that, because if fate decided to intervene, he would decide to, and at that very moment, a seed was planted, a decision that would change everything. If I have to go through hell, so be it, but I won't let her go without her seeing, in my eyes, that she always was, is, and always will be, the love of my life. At that moment, the war changed for Victor. It was no longer between countries, between armies, between territories. Now it was a war against time, against destiny, against everything, and love. Love was about to become the greatest weapon he had ever wielded. The paper trembled in Victor's hands as if it were made of wind, not cellulose. With each word he read, the world around him became more distant, more hazy, more unreal. It was as if he was suddenly caught between two wars, the one that raged around him, made of bullets, explosions, and orders, and the one that silently destroyed everything inside him, made of words, tears, and despair. He reread it, once, twice, 10 times, as if, amidst the crooked lines, the tear stains, I could find some loophole, some sign that this was nothing more than a mistake, a cruel joke played by fate. But no, the words were there, clear, cold, definitive. My love, I tried to be strong, I tried not to worry you, but the disease that has invaded me is fiercer than any war. It is a battle that I fight alone, day after day, and that, unfortunately, I seem to be losing. His chest was so tight that it felt like there was no more room for air. Every line of the letter was a stab, a wound that bled non-stop, invisible to those looking from the outside, but absolutely real to those who carried it inside. I feel my body is getting tired, Victor. I feel the time I have left is short, and only God knows if this letter will arrive in time for you to see me again. I write because I cannot leave without telling you that I loved you. I loved you more than words can explain, more than any life can bear. And if we never see each other again, know that you were, and always will be, the love of my life. He pressed the letter to his chest, as if, in that desperate gesture, he could stop reality from tearing it apart, from time taking it away, from death becoming a reality. The tears fell thick, heavy, filled with everything he had never cried in his life. Not when his friends fell in the war, not when he saw entire villages being destroyed, not when he buried his own fears on the battlefield. There, sitting at the bottom of the trench, surrounded by mud, the smell of gunpowder, and the echoes of death, Victor was no longer a soldier. He was just a man who, for the first time, felt completely powerless in the face of the world. No, this can't be happening, he whispered, as if the words, said out loud, could undo what was written. But the words don't come back. They never come back. They carry with them the weight of those who wrote them, and, sometimes, the weight of those who read them. If I could, love, I would wait for you here, on the porch of my house, wearing that blue dress that you said made me look like a piece of heaven. If I could, I would wait for you forever, but I don't know if forever will allow me to wait. He took a deep breath. He tried to get up. The legs did not obey. It was as if his entire body had given up on supporting him. As if, at that exact moment, everything that had kept him standing until then, love, hope, memories had been ripped from within him, without anesthesia, without warning. The sounds of war seemed distant now. The explosions, the screams, the gunshots, everything was muffled, as if the entire world had gone silent to watch, in respect or cruelty, the collapse of a man who understood, that there is pain that not even war can cause. Victor staggered to his feet. He walked to the edge of the trench and looked at the horizon. The sky, once grey, now seemed heavier than ever, and, even without wanting to, a question arose within him. Why? Why now? Why, after surviving so much, does destiny decide to take away from me what I love most? The commander, noticing his condition, approached. His face, hardened by years of war, revealed a rare expression of compassion. Soldier, did something happen? Victor held up the letter, but he couldn't speak. He just showed it to him. The commander took the paper, read a few lines, and immediately understood. His eyes, accustomed to seeing death, bodies, destruction, now looked at something different, a kind of pain that cannot be buried in shallow graves. For a moment, the silence between them said more than any words. "I'm sorry, .. the commander finally said. "But ... you know, there's no leave, there's no permission. The war doesn't stop. Nobody leaves here now." Those words were like another bullet. One more. As if, in addition to the pain of the news, the world was still saying, "You have no choice, you have no right, but love." Love was never about accepting what the world imposes. Victor squeezed his eyes shut, took a deep breath, and in that moment, something changed inside him. Something that neither war, nor fate, nor death could stop. "If they won't let me go, then I'll go anyway." And for the first time since he entered that war, he realized that he was about to break the one rule he had sworn never to break. He was willing to desert, running away, betraying war ... in the name of love. Because if that letter came to him as a warning, he wouldn't let it be the end of it. The world could collapse, the shots could roar, the army could chase him, but nothing, absolutely nothing would stop him from racing against time, of running against death, of racing against fate. And, in that moment, a decision was born that would change everything. A decision that was not written in any war manual, not in any code of honor. Because love, oh love, never obeyed the rules of men. The sound of the front seemed to have turned into white noise. The explosions, the screams, and the intermittent firing of machine guns sounded distant, irrelevant, as if the entire world were now inside that crumpled sheet of paper Victor held against his chest. Nothing made sense anymore. Nothing but her. But Anna. But the silent struggle she was waging, alone, against something he could not fight with a gun. For a few seconds, or maybe minutes' time, seemed to have lost all meaning. He stood there, still, his hands trembling, his gaze fixed on the horizon that promised nothing but more destruction. And inside him, a much greater war was beginning. A war that no trench could protect. A war between duty and love. The commander's words still echoed in his mind. "There is no leave. No one leaves here now. No one." And at the same time, her words, written in the letter, sounded much louder, much more urgent. "If you can, come back. If you can, come back. If you can T ... carry me in your thoughts." But how could he accept this? How could he accept that the love of his life was dying, and that he should simply remain there, as if her pain was something minor, something that could be left for later? No, there was no later, there was now, and the now was slipping through his fingers like sand through a leaky hourglass. He paced back and forth inside the trench like a caged animal. His chest rose and fell rapidly. His breathing was short, heavy, uneven. His hands passed over his face and head, as if, in an automatic gesture, he was trying to reorganize not only his thoughts, but his life itself. Victor knew what desertion meant. He knew what happened to those who were caught. Arrest, trial, shooting, and worst of all, he knew that if he fled, he would not only put his own life at risk, but he would also be seen as a traitor by the comrades who had fought alongside him for so long. But, and what was betrayal, after all? Betraying a flag, or betraying one's own heart? He squeezed his eyes shut, as if trying to erase an image from his mind. But instead, what came to mind was the memory of her smile, of that day at the lake, when she had laughed and wet the blue dress he loved so much. The sound of her laughter seemed clearer now than any order the officers had shouted. I can't just let her go, ... Not like this," he whispered, almost begging the wind, as if the universe could, somehow, answer him. But the universe remained silent. However, silence is sometimes exactly the answer, and in that silence, Victor realized no one would do anything for him. No one would give him permission. No one would open doors for him to cross minefields, guarded borders, and roads lined with soldiers, just to hold her hand as she walked away. If he wanted it, he would have to take it. He would have to conquer it. He would have to take risks that not even war itself dared to impose on him. The morning cold began to tear at her skin. The sky, once gray, now seemed like a weight about to fall on her head. But nothing, absolutely nothing, seemed as unbearable as the idea of not being there, of not seeing her, of not holding her, of not whispering in her ear, even if it was one last time. "I love you, ... double quotes." He took a deep breath. He clutched the letter to his chest. He closed his eyes. And when he opened them again, he was no longer the same man. Something inside him had changed. Something irreversible. Something final. If the war won't let me go, then I'll go anyway, and let it chase me, and let it try to stop me, because between obeying the war ... and obeying my heart ... I choose it. I will always choose it. The plan began to form in his mind, still hazy, still improvised, but sufficient. He knew where the supply routes were. I knew which stations were less guarded during the early hours of the morning. He knew how to sneak through the fields, how to cross trails that few knew about. And most of all, I knew that if it wasn't now, there would be no later. His eyes swept the trench, taking in every face, friends, comrades, brothers forged in the fires of war, and bitter guilt rose in his throat. It wasn't just the war he was about to abandon, it was them. It was the promises of mutual protection. It was the loyalty sealed between men who knew that if one fell, the other would fight to the end. But who would fight for her? That question was like a punch in the stomach, and he realized there was no answer, because there was no one, just him, just his love, just that impossible decision, which, suddenly, became the only possible one. In the distance, the warning siren sounded. Another enemy attack was approaching. Another storm of steel and fire was about to fall upon them. And Victor realized that life, sometimes, doesn't give you choices. It only gives you one chance. And it's up to you to decide whether you're going to seize it, or watch it slip through your fingers, forever. He looked up at the sky. He closed his eyes, and, in a barely audible whisper, he said the most sincere prayer he had ever said in his life. God, give me strength, give me courage, give me a chance. And if you can't give me that ... then at least forgive me for what I'm about to do ... His heart was beating so hard that it seemed ready to rip his chest apart. And, in the midst of that deafening sound of approaching death, a certainty was born, clearer than ever. If war thinks it can stop me, it will find out ... that love knows no borders, it knows no walls, it knows no orders. Love only knows one path, and that's the path I'm going to, no matter what the cost. Night fell like a heavy veil over the battlefield. The sound of explosions, which had previously filled every space of silence, gave way to a strange, uncomfortable calm. It was the kind of silence that precedes something inevitable, a silence that weighs more than 1,000 bombs, because it carries within it expectation, fear, and, in Victor's case, a decision. He lay in the trench, pretending to sleep like the other soldiers, but in truth, there was no sleep, no room for rest. There was only her, Anna, her face, her voice, her smell, her smile. Every memory pulsed so strongly that it seemed as if she were there, sitting next to him, holding his hand, as she did on Sunday afternoons, before the world fell apart. His gaze scanned the dark horizon, trying to memorize every detail of the terrain, every bump, every hole, every possible path. He knew he wouldn't get a second chance. If he missed, he would not only lose the opportunity to see her, but he would also lose his life. His hands pressed the letter against his chest, as if that piece of paper was now a compass, a map, and a reason. Every word written there was fuel for what he was about to do. If you can, come back ... That phrase wouldn't leave his head. It echoed like an insistent whisper, piercing the wind, mixing with the distant sound of machine guns, as if the universe itself were reinforcing the reminder. Run, now, run. Victor knew that the guard posts rotated every 3 hours. He had been watching for days, ever since the letter had arrived. He knew exactly where in the fence there was a hole, half hidden, probably made by some animal, and which had never been properly repaired. He knew which trails led to the main road and which were less patrolled. But he knew, above all, that this plan had no guarantees. It was a gamble, a Russian roulette against fate. And yet, for him, there was more risk in staying than in running away. He took a deep breath. He looked one last time at his sleeping companions, men who, like him, carried their own pain, their own ghosts in their chests. For a second, guilt tried to grip him. Responsibility screamed inside him. But immediately, a stronger voice silenced everything. And who will fight for her, if not you? His heart was beating so hard he was afraid someone would hear. But no, the night was protecting him. And now it was. Silently, he stood up. He grabbed his canteen, some dry rations, and the old knife that was strapped to his waist. He couldn't carry much. Any extra weight could cost him his life. He left his rifle behind, a symbolic decision. He wasn't running away from the war. He was running toward it, a war that couldn't be won with bullets, but with love. The first obstacle was the barbed wire fence that delimited the camp. He approached it, crouching, almost crawling. Each step was measured, calculated. The slightest sound could be his sentence. When he reached the fence, he found the hole. It was still there, small, cramped, but sufficient. Carefully, he lay down on the floor and began to crawl, feeling the wires scratch his back, tear the fabric of his uniform, leaving marks that would probably turn into scars if he survived. When he crossed, he lay down for a few seconds on the other side, breathing heavily. His chest rose and fell so fast, it felt like it was about to explode. But there was no time to rest. He got up and ran. He ran like someone fleeing from hell. Or, perhaps, like someone running towards the only piece of sky they still have left. The terrain was uneven. Mud, rocks, fallen logs. With every step, Victor felt his muscles scream. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. Her face appeared clearly in his mind, as if his own love was projecting images onto the dark horizon. The first patrol appeared faster than he expected. 2 soldiers, walking with flashlights, talking in low voices. Victor ducked behind a pile of rubble, holding his breath. The sound of their footsteps was like a drum beating inside his head. Don't see me, please, he repeated mentally, like a desperate prayer. The footsteps passed. Slowly, they receded. The immediate danger had passed, but there was more, much more. He reached the dirt road that led towards the village. It was deserted, as I expected, but also open, exposed, a huge risk. If someone passed by there, he would have nowhere to run. But there was no choice. He walked along the road with quick steps, looking back every few minutes, as if he expected, at any moment, to hear the cry, "Fugitive, deserter, get him." But what he heard instead was the sound of his own heart. Strong, desperate, alive. Fatigue began to take its toll. My legs hurt, his chest was burning, his throat was dry, scratchy, as if he had swallowed the very dust of the road. But still, he continued, because, inside him, there was only one certainty. Every step I take is 1 second less away from her. In the distance, he saw lights, probably a small farm or a village. He needed to hide, to rest, even if only for a few minutes. But time, time did not stop. And time was now his greatest enemy. He hid behind a barn. He took a few sips from his canteen. His hands were shaking. His whole body was shaking. And yet, he had never felt so sure of anything in his life. If I can, if I can get to her, even if it's just to hold her for a second, it will all be worth it. He looked at the sky. The stars seemed closer, as if they wanted to light their way, or perhaps they were just silent witnesses to a love that night, defied not only war, but destiny itself. He knew the dangers were far from over, that every kilometer traveled brought with it new risks. But he also knew that now there was no turning back. The escape had begun, and he would only stop when his eyes met hers. And until then, neither war nor fear, nor death itself, would be able to stop him. The sound of his own footsteps was the only noise Victor heard in that moonless dawn. I was racing not only against time, but against fear, against destiny, against my own body's limitations. The escape seemed, until that moment, a heroic act, driven by love. But war never comes cheap. She charges, always charge, and it's expensive. Soaked boots sank into the mud, each step demanding more than the muscles were willing to give. The cold bit the skin like invisible razors, and the wind brought the bitter smell of smoke, blood, and hopelessness. Itself, Victor knew that the path ahead would not be easy, but not even in his worst nightmares did he imagine that. In addition to the men's pursuit, he would also have to fight against his own body, which was beginning to give way. The accumulated fatigue from weeks at the front, the lack of sleep, the scarce food, everything now seemed to add up, turning each step into a battle, each kilometer into a minefield of exhaustion. In the distance, the sound of engines broke the silence. Trucks, troops, moving they already knew. They had already noticed his absence. War, treacherous as it is, doesn't just kill. It chases, it hunts. And now, Victor was the prey. He threw himself into a ditch, covered by twisted bushes. He lay on the frozen ground, holding his breath as the beams of light from the flashlight streaked across the night. Voices approached, firm, hurried, filled with anger. He can't have gone far. Check every path, every trail. Let's not lose another deserter. His chest rose and fell so fast it felt like it was about to explode. He pressed himself against the ground, smelling the strong scent of wet earth, of rotting leaves, of fear. Fear had a smell and a taste, and now Victor knew exactly what it felt like. The boots passed within a few feet. Miraculously, no one looked into the ditch, and as the sound of footsteps and engines began to fade, he finally took a breath. But it was a short, painful breath, because the danger had not passed. It had merely changed location. He waited a few minutes. Silence now seemed like an ally. He slowly got out of the ditch, taking care not to make any noise. He looked both ways on the road. Nothing, just darkness and the echo of his own heartbeats. Continued. The terrain became more rugged. Steep inclines, loose rocks, branches that broke beneath his feet, betraying his presence to any attentive ear. But there was no alternative. He had to keep going. To stop was to die. And more than that, to stop was to fail her, to Anna, to the silent promise he made the moment he decided to run away. I will find you, even if it's the last thing I do. He walked for hours, sometimes running, sometimes crawling, sometimes simply dragging himself along, when his legs seemed to no longer have the strength to obey. And with every kilometer, the war took its toll. Blood from the wounded knees, tears in the skin made by the branches, blisters on my feet that burst, filling my socks with pain. The cold was relentless. Hunger was beginning to eat away at him from the inside out, and his body was shaking, not just from exhaustion, but from fever. He knew that if he didn't find shelter soon, he might not even need to be captured. Nature itself, as cruel as war, would make his body give up. He finally found a small abandoned building in the middle of the forest. Perhaps it had once been a lookout post, or some wooden house. Now, it was just rubble, but to Victor, it looked like a palace, a refuge. He dragged himself over there. He went inside. He collapsed on the rotten floorboards. His hands were shaking so badly that he could barely open the canteen. He took a sip. The liquid was cold, but it felt like fire going down his throat. His body was now showing clear signs that it was close to its limit. Every muscle throbbed in pain. Every joint felt like it was about to snap. His vision blurred. His heart was beating so fast that for a moment he thought it would simply stop. But it didn't stop, because, in the midst of that internal storm, a single image kept his soul alight. Her face, Anna, lying on the old porch of the house, waiting for him, fragile, pale, fighting not only against illness, but against time. And now, also against distance. If she's there, fighting, then I'm there too. As far as I can, as far as God allows. He fell asleep for a few minutes, or hours. Time, once again, has diluted itself. When he woke up, the faint light of dawn was beginning to break through the sky. The clouds were still heavy, but a timid golden streak appeared on the horizon, like a promise that, perhaps, not all was lost. He stood up. His legs were shaking. His body felt like it was made of stone. But he stood up, because sometimes, that's what love is. It's getting up, when everything inside you just wants to fall. As he left the building, he noticed tire tracks on the nearby dirt road, and footprints, lots of them. They were close, searching. War does not forget, and, once again, it took its toll. But now, something inside him was different, a gentle anger, a strength that didn't come from his body, but from his soul. Because if he was going to fall, he had to try. He had to fight for what really mattered. Because of all the wars he had fought, this was the only one that really made sense. If I die today, may it be trying to reach you. May it be with your name on my chest, and with your love holding my heart until the last second. And then, it continued, bleeding, moaning, panting. But it continued, because the price that war exacts, he was willing to pay. The day dawned slowly, as if even time itself hesitated to advance in that forgotten part of the world, where love and war fought a silent, almost invisible battle. The golden light of the sun tried to break through the heavy gray of the clouds, but it was a weak, timid light, almost powerless in the face of the vastness of that devastated landscape. Victor walked, or rather, he dragged himself. Each step seemed to take more effort than the last. His body no longer responded as it had before. His legs were shaking, his chest was burning, his dry mouth was crying out for water, for rest, for surrender. But his heart would not stop. It beat strongly, insistently, as if it were shouting, "Go, keep going, don't stop. She's waiting for you." Around every bend in the road, a new threat. The distant sound of gunfire, the muffled roar of military vehicles, fresh tracks of enemy patrols. War was everywhere. There was no shelter, no peace, not even a corner where he could, for a second, forget that he was being hunted by both death and time. It was then that, in the distance, his eyes caught sight of something that seemed, at the same time, a miracle and a trap. The ruins of an old chapel. Small, forgotten, half swallowed by the forest, half fallen by time and bombings. The windows were broken, the cross hung crookedly on top, the walls cracked. But still standing, without thinking, Victor headed there. The remaining forces seemed to be concentrated on that single desire, to enter, to hide, to breathe, and who knows, to find, in that place, something that neither war, nor fear, nor pain could steal. As he pushed open the broken door, it creaked loudly, like a scream coming from within the very bowels of time. For a second, the sound seemed so loud that he almost believed the entire world had heard it. But no, inside, the silence was absolute. Light entered in thin beams through the holes in the walls. Dust danced in the air, like tiny golden stars floating in a forgotten sky. In the background, still intact, the altar resisted, and, above it, a broken image of some saint, without a face, without arms. But there, firm, Victor walked to the center of the ship. His footsteps echoed in the void, and there, in the middle of that piece of destroyed world, his knees finally gave way. He fell, not because of physical weakness, but because something inside him collapsed. Because, until that moment, he had fought against everything: men, bullets, time, destiny. But now, there was no one left to fight against. Now, all that was left was to surrender, but not to war, not to death. Surrender to something greater. He closed his eyes. He clasped his hands, stained with dried blood, mud, and pain. And for the first time in a long time, he prayed, "God, I don't know if you still hear me. I don't know if you still look at this forgotten part of the world. I don't know if you still have time for those who seek you in the middle of war. But if you do, if you can, hear me now, because I have nowhere else to go. I have no more strength. I don't know what to do." The tears came without him realizing it. They fell heavy, hot, burning the dirty face, as if they wanted to wash not only the skin, but the entire soul. She's dying. Lord, the woman I love, the reason for everything, is leaving. And I just want to get to her. I'm not asking to be saved. I'm not asking to get out of this war alive. I'm just asking, let me get there. Let me hold her hand. Let me look into her eyes, even if it's for the last time, His entire body was shaking, no longer just from exhaustion, but from something he couldn't name. Something that mixed pain, despair, faith, and love. If I don't deserve it, then, forgive me. If I messed up, if I failed, if I did everything wrong, forgive me. But please, don't let me fail this. Don't let me fail her. Don't let me be too late. The silence responded. But it was not the silence of absence. It was that strange, profound silence that only those who have prayed at the limit of their own existence know. A silence that does not respond, but welcomes. That does not speak, but listens. For a few seconds or minutes, or maybe an eternity, Victor felt something he couldn't explain. A strange peace. Painful, yes, but somehow real. As if, there, kneeling in the middle of the ruins, someone was saying to him, without using words, "Get up, keep going, I am with you." He took a deep breath. He wiped away the tears, even though he knew they wouldn't stop anytime soon. He looked at the broken image on the altar, and even without a face, even without arms, it seemed to be looking back at him, as if to say, "Go, she's waiting for you, and you know, she's always been waiting for you." He got up with difficulty. My legs hurt. The whole body seemed to be made of lead, but he still got up. Because now I understood. Prayer, was not a bargain. It wasn't a request in exchange for something. It was a hug in the invisible. It was a reminder that even when everything fails, there is still faith. And sometimes that's all you have. And that's all you need. He took her letter from his pocket. He pressed it to his chest. "Wait for me, Anna, ... Just a little longer, I'm coming. Even if it's with the last bit of strength I have left ... I'm coming." He looked out of the chapel. The day was finally breaking through the clouds. The sky was opening up, timidly, and for the first time in days, he saw a patch of blue. Maybe it was just the sky, or maybe ... it was a sign. And then, with his body broken but his soul alight, Victor walked again. I knew the road would still be long, that dangers were still lurking, but now ... he no longer walked alone. Because when war doesn't give you shelter ... prayer becomes a home. It becomes a ceiling, turning to ground, and that was what he clung to now. Victor didn't know what to expect when he reached the village. The road, which had previously seemed to be a clear path, now seemed to disappear into mist, confusing, tortuous, as if fate was playing with him. The weight of weeks at war, the fatigue, hunger and fever, everything mixed together inside him. But there was no doubt, he knew where he had to go. It didn't matter what happened now, he had to see her. I had to be by her side. As he walked, the sky, previously covered by heavy clouds, seemed to slowly open up. It wasn't a grand change. There were no rays of sunlight illuminating the way, but there was a strange, almost comforting calm, as if the universe itself was preparing for that encounter, for that moment. Victor didn't allow himself to think about anything else. Each step was a silent prayer, a plea that had no words but could be heard deep in his soul. He already knew. He knew that when he arrived, she would be there, not like before, not with the same strength, but it would still be her, the woman he loved. And yet, an immense pain took hold of him. The fear that, upon arrival, everything would be an illusion. The fear of not being able to say everything I needed to. The village was silent, almost deserted, as if death had already passed by there and, somehow, the war had taken a step back, leaving only the memory of what had been. Victor felt a chill run down his spine. Every corner, every door, every window seemed to be watching him, as if the entire house knew that this moment was about to arrive. And then he saw her. She was there, on the porch of the house that had once been their home, with the doors open, but with the heavy air of longing impregnated in every brick, every piece of wood. Anna was sitting in the rocking chair. Her eyes, which had once been full of life, were now dull, lost somewhere between the world and the beyond. Her pale skin, her loose hair, her thin and fragile body, but still, she was there. Victor stopped for a moment on the other side of the street. The wind, soft, moved the curtains, making them ripple, as if time itself were trying to touch what fate had separated. He took one step, then another. With each movement, the weight of the world seemed to increase, but there was no turning back, no more hesitation. The path was before him. He had to reach the last line of what was left of his life, and that was just one thing. Her Anna. She lifted her head, not with the energy he knew, not with the strength she had always had, but still, she lifted her head. Her eyes, weak, met his, and in that instant, everything disappeared. There was no more war. There was no more pain. There was nothing left but that look. The look of someone who knew that love, somehow, never fails. Victor walked towards her, his heart pounding, fear now tightening his throat. He knelt in front of her, still trying to control himself, still trying to understand what was happening. She said nothing. She just looked at him, the look that had always calmed him, that had always understood him. Now, with the softness of pain. What did he want to say? What did he want to do? There were no words. There were no gestures that could fill the abyss of longing, of suffering, of loss that existed between them. She reached out, her hands struggling, her fingers trembling, but her intention was clear. Victor held it carefully, as if it were the most precious thing he had ever touched. And when their fingers touched, it was as if the world stopped. The weight of war, the pain of distance, it all melted away. All that was left was the warmth of her touch. She smiled, a weak smile, but full of meaning. She knew he was there, that he had fought, and even in the end, love did not waver. Her smile, though fragile, was the answer that even when time tries to tear everything away from us, love still survives. You arrived, was all she could say, her voice so low, so fragile, but so full of everything he needed to hear. Victor, unable to speak, simply looked at her, feeling the tears burning in his eyes. There were no words to describe what he felt. The relief, the pain, the love, everything mixed into one feeling, so strong that it seemed impossible to bear. He stroked her face with his trembling hands, trying to memorize every detail. The outline of her eyes, the curve of her nose, the shape of her lips, everything he could, everything he needed to carry with him. "I love you, ... double quotes," he whispered, his voice breaking. She smiled again, this time weaker, as if that smile was the last thing she could give him. And in that moment, Victor knew. He knew that this was their last moment, their last meeting, their last breath. But deep down, he also knew that nothing, not even death, could erase what they had shared. She closed her eyes. A faint smile was still on her lips. Victor held her hand tighter, trying desperately to keep that moment alive, as if it were possible to hold back time. And there, in her last breath, he felt what few can feel: peace. War can destroy many hearts, but it cannot destroy true love. And at that moment, Victor understood that, despite everything, love is the only thing that remains, even when everything else falls apart. He stayed by her side until the end, and when she left, a part of Victor went with her. But another part, the part he would always call home, stayed there forever, because love never dies, it only changes. And although bodies are lost in time, love remains immortal, like a flame that, even when extinguished, leaves behind the eternal light of memory. Time, that old tyrant who until then seemed to only know how to tear away, destroy and take away everything that was beautiful. In that brief instant, ... bowed. For the first time in that entire war, time did not run. It did not run away. It did not tear away anything. On the contrary, for the first time, time performed a miracle. Victor, with Anna in his arms, felt it. He felt the miracle of every second that still pulsed between them. Even though she was weak, with her short breath and her skin pale, she was there, and that ... that was everything. More than anything, it was the entire universe condensed in the still present warmth of that hand that held his. For a moment that seemed to defy any logic, any rule of the world, they were out of time, out of war, out of any reality where love could be defeated. She was breathing hard, her eyes opening and closing like windows that were slowly getting ready to close for good. But while they were open, each look she gave him said more than any words could ever say. "You came back. You came back to me ... she whispered, so low, so fragile, but so full of life. He held her face, brought his forehead close to hers, and, with a choked voice, replied, "I told you, I promised you ... neither war, nor the world, nothing would stop me. I'm back, I'm here, and I'm not leaving anymore." She smiled, a light, almost childish smile, a smile that carried not only the relief of their reunion, but the certainty that, against all odds, they had won, even if only for a short time, even if it was just for that moment. The next few days were uneventful. There was no more room for plans, for dreams of a distant future. What they had was the present, and somehow the present had become so precious that it seemed to contain within it all the lives they could have had, all the futures that the war had stolen. Victor cared for her with a delicacy that he himself did not even know he possessed. He helped her to stand up, held her fragile body, combed her hair, caressed her thin hands. He fed her when she could eat, and when she could not, he simply held her hand, as if in that gesture he could convey not only strength, but also enough love for her to stay a little longer. They sat on the porch, exactly where, years before, they had sworn eternal love when they were still young and believed that life was generous. And, even now, even with her fighting against time, that place became a sanctuary, a piece of the world where war did not enter, where love, and only love, was allowed to exist. "Remember ... that day at the lake?" she asked, her eyes half closed, her head resting on his shoulder. He smiled, hugged her to his chest and replied, I remember every detail. You got your blue dress wet, you tripped and almost fell, and I promised that if you fell, I would fall with you, just to catch you." She laughed, a weak laugh, but a genuine one. "And you ... fell with me. And we stood there ... laughing ... as if nothing else existed." He looked into her eyes, wiped away a tear that was running down her cheek, and whispered, "And, if I have to fall, I'll fall with you again, as many times as necessary. Because there's no place in the world where I want to be, other than by your sighed. The wind blew, bringing the scent of flowers that insisted on blooming, even in the midst of chaos. The sky, that day, seemed bluer, cleaner, as if even he understood that, for a short time, he had to bow before that miracle. The miracle of a love that time could not destroy. In those days, there was no clock, there was no counting, there was no fear of what came next. There was just that moment, those infinite seconds where everything made sense. Lying together in bed, Victor held her hand while she, with her eyes half closed, whispered things that only he could hear. Memories of when they first met, of their first dates, of their walks through the village, of the promises made under the starry sky. And, between one memory and another, the same question, said in the sweetest and saddest voice in the world. Do you think that, when all this is over, we'll still meet? He squeezed her hand, kissed her forehead, and replied, in a firm but tender voice, I don't. I'm sure. Because love, my love, love knows no end. Love goes through everything. It goes through time. It goes through death. It goes through eternity. She smiled. She closed her eyes, breathing slowly. Then, wait for me. On the other side, always, he replied, holding her tighter. I will always wait for you. I will always look for you. And when I find you, we will pick up right where we left off. Time, which until then seemed to be the enemy, at that moment, became an accomplice. It allowed them to have that miracle, that piece of eternity stolen from the line of life, because their love was greater than war, greater than pain, greater than time itself. They fell asleep like that, together, their skin pressed together, their hands intertwined, their hearts beating in the same rhythm. And even though her body was fading away, what they had in that moment was more alive than anything. Because, when love is true, time bends, and, however brief it may be, it becomes a miracle. The world seemed to have stopped. The sound of the wind, which had previously swayed the trees, was now just a distant whisper, almost like a sad melody made of silence and memories. The light of dawn entered through the cracks in the window, scattering golden beams that drew soft contours on the ground, as if even the sun itself, a silent witness to everything, understood that this moment needed to be treated with reverence. Victor was there, sitting on the edge of the bed. His hands were holding hers, hands that, although fragile, still held the warmth of love. Anna's body was still, serene, so serene that for a moment he fooled himself into thinking she was just sleeping, that soon she would open her eyes, smile and say, as she had done in the mornings before the war, 5 more minutes, But the silence was different now. It was no longer the silence of someone sleeping. It was the silence of someone who had left, taking everything with them, except love. Victor squeezed her hand tighter, as if in that gesture he could stop the world from taking her away for good. The tears fell hot and thick, leaving trails on the dirty face, marked by pain and longing that was already beginning to grow, like a storm about to break. For a few seconds or minutes, maybe hours, because time no longer made sense, he stood there, alone, with her, and with everything that was now becoming a memory. Her scent was still there, the scent of her hair, her skin, her life that, although slowly fading, left behind a perfume that no death would be able to take away. He lifted her hand to his lips. He kissed it so gently, so carefully, that it felt like he was kissing not just her skin, but her very essence. And in that gesture, there was more than love. There was a pact, a silent vow, that even if she was no longer there, she would never cease to exist within him. "You didn't die, ... he whispered, his voice broken, almost unrecognizable. "You will never die. As long as I breathe, as long as I exist, you live in me, in my chest, in my memory, in my love. And when I'm no longer here, even so, you will continue. Because love, my love doesn't die." He lay down beside her. He pulled her gently into his arms, as he had done on the nights before the war. And for a moment, he closed his eyes, imagining that it was all just a nightmare. That when he opened them, she would be there, smiling, alive, full of life, ready to talk about plans, about children, about the future. But when he opened it, she was still there, beautiful, serene, but at peace. Peace. A word that, until that moment, seemed to not exist in the midst of so much chaos. And, somehow, he realized that, although it hurt, That departure was not a defeat. It was love fulfilled. Love lived until the last second. Victor stood up. He walked around the house, touching the objects, looking at each photograph, each memory. The chairs, the table, the old broken cup in the kitchen, the books piled up on the shelf. Everything there told a story. Their story. A story that, even if the whole world forgot, was engraved in him, in his body, in his soul, in his heart. In the backyard, the sunflowers she loved so much were still there. Even though they had been neglected, even though they had been forgotten for weeks, they insisted on growing, on turning towards the sun. And in that moment, Victor understood. Love was like that. Even when life tried to tear everything away, even when everything seemed to fall apart, love still found a way to bloom, to remain. He knelt there, among the sunflowers, and, looking up at the sky, he spoke to her, as if she was still there, as if she could still hear, and, deep down, he knew she could. I did it, my love, I promised you, ... and I did it. I came back, I found you, I held you, I loved you, ... until the last second, and I will continue, until the last second of my life. The tears fell, but now they were no longer just tears of pain. They were tears of gratitude, of love that overflows so much that one no longer knows whether it hurts or heals. Maybe it is both. Maybe that is what love does in the end. It hurts, ... but it also saves. When he returned to the house, he sat down next to her again. He took a piece of paper, a blank sheet of paper, and, with shaky handwriting, he began to write a letter. The last letter. Asterisk, my love. If you could hear me now, you would know that even without seeing me breathe, you still live, and you will live as long as I exist. You know, I always thought that love was something for people who don't know the weight of the world. I thought that war, pain, death, ... would be greater, that they would be able to tear it away from me, but I was wrong. Love, our love, ... is the only thing that has conquered everything. It has conquered time, it has conquered distance, it has even conquered death. And one day, my love, when I also close my eyes, for the last time, ... wait for me on the balcony. Wait for me with that blue dress, with that smile that I will never forget, because I'll come running to you. And when I get there, ... we'll continue. I love you, I loved you, and I will love you, until the end. Asterisk, he folded the paper. He placed it on her chest, and with one last kiss on her forehead, he said goodbye, not to the woman, but to her body, because she would never leave, never again. The sound of the broken village bells swayed in the wind, and in that sound, there was something sacred, something eternal, something that said that even though the war continued, even though the world fell apart, their love would remain. Because there are things that not even death can take away, and love, oh love, will always be one of them. If this story touched your heart, if you believe that love is the only thing that is truly worth it, then subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications and share this story. Here, each video is a reminder that even when all seems lost, love always finds a way. Subscribe, because here, stories live, even when the person who lived them is gone.